Hello and welcome to Transfermarkt TV. I'm Manuel, he is Stefan Bienkowski, and today's big topic is Timo Werner to Tottenham. Stefan, first thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I think he was one that probably surprised a lot of people. We've seen Timo Werner linked with a number of clubs in the January window, but it now looks as though he's off to Tottenham. And while there may be some kind of smirking glances from Stamford Bridge and Chelsea fans, there's probably more to it than this than just a simple case of, Tottenham hoovering up any players they can find. I think this might be a move that works quite well, but it's probably worth us maybe explaining why Timo Werner's back in England after seemingly leaving to return to Germany for game time not that long ago, actually.
Yeah, 18 months ago. This was a transfer filled with so much hope. I think the thinking in Leipzig was that, this is a player who can replace Christopher Nkunku, who back then was already heavily linked with a move to Chelsea. In fact, the transfer already back then was pretty much done, right? Just not confirmed. And so, this was sort of this is great. Christopher Nkunku is going to leave. Timo Werner is going to come back. They are similar players. He's going to fit right in. And, the issue was, of course, that Nkunku was still there. And he had a decent first season, scored 9 goals in 27 Bundesliga games. But then Leipzig went through this turmoil, is maybe the wrong word, because, yes, they had a huge turnover, but for the most part, the players that they brought in worked out quite well. What didn't work out quite well was Werner's standing inside that team, because a lot of these new signings actually surpassed him in the pecking order, I think, a lot faster than they expected in Leipzig. First of all, Louis Openda, the striker, he just a better fit. Yusuf Poulsen became a really good utility player to play next to Openda, so all of a sudden that spot was gone. But then on top of that, Benjamin Sesko became the player off the bench. So we are halfway through the season. Werner has played 8 Bundesliga games, which isn't great, but it's even worse when you look at the actual minutes played, and that's only 203. So, it's just for some odd reason in this change-up, in this huge amount of turnover that Leipzig had, Leipzig also changed the way they played, and all of a sudden, Werner wasn't an important piece anymore.
Yeah, we see quite a lot of players actually move on. Obviously, Carvalho's returned to Liverpool. Forsberg's moved on to the MLS. But perhaps most intriguingly I think this is a kind of interesting kind of what if, or, you see those memes of like the tiny little domino leading to the bigger and bigger thing. And I do wonder if the somewhat shock and surprise at Dominik Szoboszlai moving to Liverpool in the summer, which was a move that, of course, Leipzig always expected Szoboszlai to move on at some point, but I don't think they expected Liverpool to come in, pay his release clause, and swoop in and pick him up as quickly as they did. And that did kind of force Marco Rose to kind of shuffle his pack very quickly, didn't it? And we've seen that as a result almost force Marco Rose to be like, right, here's the guys I can rely on. As you said, Sesko, Xavi Simons, Openda. And these are the guys that actually I don't really have time for, or different stages of their career, and we're as well moving them on. It seems like Timo Werner has moved into that second list because, while he's now moving to Tottenham, he was heavily linked with a move to Real Madrid. He was linked with a move to Man United. Reading between the lines, that's obviously someone's agent working overtime to try and find him somewhere for full-time football because, it feels like Timo Werner's been around forever, but he's only 27 years old. He's still got a lot of football left to play, and he is desperately looking for a club that can give him that solid, regular game time.
Never go back, Stefan. I think that's a lesson here. I think that Leipzig in a lot of ways have just moved on from the Leipzig that they were when Timo Werner was very successful. And, football has also changed a little bit, and Timo Werner hasn't really fully adapted. I think one of the biggest things that have hurt Timo Werner's ability to score goals is the introduction of VAR, because he's always on the edge, right? And I think Marco Rose had a lot of frustration in his inability to teach Timo Werner to time his runs better. And with the lack of timing his runs also came this almost the second thing in his game is this lack of confidence to when he did actually beat the offside trap to finish his chances. And I think he just needs a coach and an environment where that can give him back the confidence that he's currently lacking. I personally think there's still a very good player there. I think the question though is, And I think this is where you come in, because you know the Tottenham setup, and the man who's now in charge of Tottenham quite well, because he was previously in charge of Celtic, right?
Yeah, Ange Postecoglou, who plays a very kind of intense, almost gegenpressing is maybe the best way to describe it in certain parts of the world, style of football where, it's very in their face, very counter-pressing, and he expects all his players to do a lot of running off the ball. And one of the most fascinating things, actually, one of our colleagues, Ewan Roberts, wrote a great article at the start of the season, actually, before Tottenham's kind of form fell off, and he explained, obviously, Ange Postecoglou had a lot of success at Celtic, but with that success came rather with an increased intensity, and with that increased intensity came a lot of injuries. And we've kind of already begun to see that this season at Tottenham, most predominantly around those kind of defensive players. But of course, James Maddison, who's kind of been the key playmaker for them this season, picked up an injury alongside some other kind of attacking players. Solomon, for example, is another one who was signed as a kind of hopeful wide player who can kind of provide depth, maybe even be a starter. He's been injured as well. So obviously, Tottenham went into this transfer window thinking we need to sign players who can fill in a number of positions up front, which is something Timo Werner can do. We need players who are well adjusted and well educated in that kind of counter-pressing school of football, which of course Timo Werner has done very well at RB Leipzig and in Germany in general, as well as working under Thomas Tuchel at Chelsea as well. And he's obviously a very smart player off the ball. But there's also the Timo Werner, the striker, which often gets overlooked, I think, and it's something that's definitely worth pointing out here, because for all his seemingly misfortune or lack of form at Chelsea, he did leave that club with a pretty respectable 0.44 goals and assists per 90 minutes in the Premier League. Now, that's obviously not going to win him the Golden Boot anytime soon, but when we actually compare that to Tottenham's current forward line this season, it's actually better than Dejan Kulusevski's doing, who has been a very impressive player for Tottenham. It's just below Brennan Johnson, who's been more of an impact sub actually this season. I think it just kind of goes to show that even when he's down on his luck, even when he's in a Chelsea team that maybe hasn't got much time for him, he was still picking up decent results. And actually his form for RB Leipzig over the last kind of couple of seasons has actually been either that or better. So he is a player who can score, and he's a player who can create goals as well. He's a player who can play off the ball. And when you kind of look at that Tottenham team and the goals that they have or haven't scored this season, it shows that they do need a bit more depth. Obviously, if you actually look at their goal scoring so far this season, you got Heung-min Son on 12 goals, you got Richarlison on 7, Kulusevski on 5, and then it's Christian Romero on 3. Christian Romero, obviously the central defender. So there's no doubt that they are kind of looking for more sources of goals and assists. And, Timo Werner might not have the best reputation in the Premier League, but I think considering the kind of factors involved in this deal, it's not a big transfer, it's not an expensive signing. I think it could prove to be a really smart move from Ange Postecoglou.
Yeah, Mario Gomez, the director of sport at Red Bull, called this a win-win-win-win. Where Leipzig win because, they obviously get to, maybe Werner finds his feet again and comes back stronger. If he comes back, of course, there's, I think, an option to buy. Werner wins because he finally gets an environment where he can play. Germany win because, if he finds his form again, then Germany have a striker. And of course, Tottenham win if they get a good player. So a quadruple win. We'll see if that comes true. We'll be back soon with more content. Until then, cheers and bye-bye.